Hey South Hills, as a church, we have 8 values that define who we desire to be as a collective church and as individual followers of Christ. I think it's important to share these values and what they really mean with all of you. The value I want to unpack today is this: we won't wait for someone else to reach our neighbors. We are not the kind of community that waits around hoping someone else will do it. We believe in taking action because we know that God has placed us right where we are among our neighbors and friends for a reason. It's not just about showing others the love of God. It's about inviting them into their very own relationship with Him. One way we start the process is by investing in the people around us. That's why we are passionate about teaching on the topics that we know unchurched people around us are interested in. We want to speak to the questions and concerns they have in their everyday lives. And we want to make it easy for you to invite them to join you right here on Sundays. We believe that the love and hope we've found should overflow into the lives of those around us. So let's roll up our sleeves, invest into our neighbors, and invite them to experience all that Jesus has to offer. Let's be the catalyst for the positive change in our neighborhoods and beyond.
Emery! Over the head. Can you put your pants on?
Have you seen Emery's bows?
Come on, man. I got pants.
Come on this side? No, we're not.
Here you go. Where's your other shoe? I got underneath the trampoline. How'd it get in there? All right. Let's go.
The kids.
Guys, let's go.
Every single way.
We're so close. It's Saturday, isn't it?
Yep.
Farts! Well, let's just chalk this up to a trial run, huh? Who wants ice cream?
I don't know what's happening, but I'm just enjoying this. Right
Good morning.
here.
Good morning. Morning, friend. How are you?
Good.
This is not going well already. It is Pastor Appreciation Month, and we wanted to say thank you for everything that you do for all of us. So, please round of applause. So, we wanted to let you know that collectively we got you some Lakers gear. We'll count next game as being their first actual game since they lost their first one.
Hey, we don't need to talk about that.
Sorry. Yeah. I know, yes. So we just wanted to know that we love you. We appreciate everything you do for us. You have brought us all here at this place. You help us hear God when we are not listening. You help us get together when we don't feel like it, and we appreciate you so much. And we would not be anywhere else than here. So we appreciate it. So thank you.
We also, I'm not done yet.
Oh.
So we try to come up with, I know you love the Lakers and we want to spoil you rotten, but we wanted to do something meaningful and important too. So we know how much you love books. So we wrote you a book. It's probably not very good, but we did our best to collect all of the stories that we could possibly collect in the time that we had over the last 30 days to tell you how much we appreciate you so that you can reflect back on those forever. So this is for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll take it back for you. Yes, of course. Give it up for Pastor Adam.
Thank you guys so much. It's even better that it was presented by a samurai. I don't know if that was part of this or just happened to be costumes and candy, but it did next level it. And thank you guys for everyone who contributed and curses to all those who didn't. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't really expect anything, and I love that I get to do this job, and I love this church, and it's meant so much to me and my family, and it really feels like a privilege to get to do what I do. And I'm glad that you guys keep showing up, because then I don't have a job if that doesn't happen. So I enjoy that I get to keep doing what I do, and that it is meaningful to you as well. And so with that, I'm going to do what I actually came out here to do. That threw me off a little bit. If you don't know me and you're like, what is happening right now? My name is Adam. I'm the campus pastor here at our South Hills Corona campus. And we are wrapping up something that we've been calling Family Month, which is where we spend an entire month of the year just talking about how to have better relationships at the core of our lives. Because we all have families, right? Whether you are married, whether you're dating somebody, whether you are a kid, maybe you are divorced, maybe you have been remarried or re-remarried, whatever the case may be, we all want to have good relationships, and we don't always know how to do that. And I think at the core of it, we find ourselves sort of living out our lives according to a handful of relational lies that really sabotage God's best for us. And that's what we decided to do during this series, is just dismantle one at a time the 5 relational lies that ruin relationships. And so we've done that for the last several weeks. And this week we're going to end with the 5th lie. And I want to encourage you to take some notes today. Write down something that stands out to you. Maybe you take a picture of the slides as they come up on the screens, whatever works for you. But the idea is not just to hear something and be inspired by it, but to actually take something home with you and apply it to your everyday life. And if you are taking notes, the title of my message today is Mountains, Buttons, Cycles, and Coming Home. Mountains, Buttons, Cycles, and Coming Home. My wife and I have 3 kids, and when they were younger, it took us a long time to actually go out to a restaurant with all 3 children, because if you have been to a restaurant with lots of small children, it is not fun for anyone that's there, really. The children are miserable. Everyone around you is like, why are they here? Ruining the rest of our lives, right? That's what it felt like for us. And so restaurants do this thing where they try and help you, where they give you these little color packs. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? And they have these little 4 crayon color packs, like the green, yellow, red, and blue. And they do this to try and help you as a parent, as a family. And for me, this just started so many fights in my family. These stupid little 4-pack crayon things. My kids would fight over these all the time, because there would be the 4 crayons, and they would always give you a pack where one of the crayons was broken. And so then we would scramble them. And so then a kid would be using a crayon, and then somebody else wanted to use that one crayon. And they were like, I would like to use that red. And then they were like, okay. And then no, the tip's broken. I don't want to use this one. And then I don't like it. And then use this red. I don't want that red. I want that red. I want the red that he has. And they're fighting about it, and everyone's getting upset. And it just escalating. And you're like, can we use it? And then I'll break the crayons in half, and they can each use the same red. And they're like, no, it's not the same. It doesn't fit in my hand right. And everything just ends up being this escalating fight. And this thing that they gave you to sort of make your life better feels like it's just making everything worse, right? And I'm ashamed to say how many times everything got whipped into a frenzy around these little 4 crayon packs. And as the kids are fighting over it, I don't want that green, I want a different green. It's all the same green. It comes from the same mold. It's the same thing, but to them, it's different. And I think the thing that's frustrating is not just that they're fighting, but that they're fighting over something stupid. And I wonder if you have ever sort of walked up on people before that were fighting, and you're like, oh man, it seems heated. And you get into the middle of it, and you're like, wait, is this what you guys are fighting over? And they reveal that is indeed what they're fighting over. And you're like, oh, this is dumb. And you just want to slap all of the people involved. And this is not just a kid thing. I feel like this is something that happens with adults quite a bit, especially when I'm sitting around now that we're approaching the holidays with family, and people are talking to each other, and the things that my family will get in fights about, my extended family, that just seems so ridiculous. Like the trivial details of a story that happened 20 years ago, Someone will be like, no, that wasn't 1996. That was 1997. And I remember that specifically because no, it was 98. Because I'm like, the year has nothing to do with the plot line. It doesn't matter. And yet these people are willing to kill each other, right, over that thing. They're arguing about stuff that really doesn't matter. It's stupid sort of stuff. Like, which NBA team is the best? Everyone knows it's the Lakers. It doesn't matter. It's not a conversation. Why are we even, right? People arguing about things like, like what a historical figure would like now. People do this all the time. We're never going to know if Susan B. Anthony would like Skittles. Why are we talking about this? This is a dumb topic. And there's this sort of saying that, you probably heard of, like, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like this idea of, like, don't take something that's so small and silly and stupid and inconsequential and blow it up into this thing that begins to blow your relationships to bits. And I think that's great advice. But it's not just little things or inconsequential things that we get in fights about that stir up problems for us. And I think that's the bigger question. Like, what if what has come between you and somebody else really is a mountain? Like, what if that thing is really big? What if it's so big that there's no pretending it didn't happen, there's no pretending it isn't a problem, that it didn't hurt you, that it didn't change the relationship? Like, the thing that took place between the two of you was a big deal. Like when they told you that they didn't want you or didn't think you should marry the person that you're now with. It's hard to sort of let that one slide. Or when you really, really needed them and they said, hey, let me know anytime you need, and you reached out and you made it really clear how much you really needed them and they didn't show up for you. And it's hard to let that go. When you thought that they were for you, you thought that they had your back and they talked you up in front of you, but then you found out that behind your back, they were talking trash on you, that they actually stabbed you in the back when you weren't around. And these moments sort of deflate us. And I think what makes them so crushing is that you don't see them coming. They catch you off guard. I think what the biggest moments that affect us have in common are that someone you expected to be for you took action against you, and then it devastates you. That's what's so difficult about it. If you expect that somebody is not going to have your back and they don't have your back, it's kind of not as big a deal. But when you really expect that someone's for you and they don't rise to the occasion, in fact, they don't do the thing that you thought they would and should do, they do the opposite, it's devastating. And maybe in your case, maybe there was a whole lot more to the story. Maybe there were details that you're not aware of. But when you looked at the situation, what you thought was, if you really cared about me, you would have done this. And they didn't. And whether or not your expectation was realistic is another story, but like all that you really know is that what happened between the two of you really messed you up. And sometimes these moments mark the end of a relationship for us. I think it's interesting, especially around this time of year when we're having what we call Family Month, and I talk to different people. How many people have someone in their family that they don't really talk to anymore? Like that they're not really in contact with anymore. Like this is way more common than maybe you would assume. And because it's happened so frequently, you can start to wonder, is like this just the way it is? Are there certain rifts that you just can't repair? And I think that can be a tough question to answer at times. Because depending on what happened in the relationship, with some people, maybe the rift that took place is maybe something you don't want to repair. And maybe you shouldn't. At least maybe you shouldn't try and put the relationship back together in the way that it was before. Like maybe the best thing for you and them is actually for you to love them at a distance, for there not to be as much closeness because it's not actually healthy for either one of you. But then there are these other relationships where part of you wonders if enough time has passed and if maybe you've grown enough that there's the potential to maybe put things back together, to patch things up. Because you're not satisfied with the fact that things have peeled apart and the things that took place and where things have settled. And if you've ever found yourself there, you're not alone. I think a lot of people find themselves in this space. And today I want to unpack this Old Testament story about this person who is in this moment in his life. where he is on the verge of recontacting somebody in his family that he hasn't spoken to in over 2 decades. And I want us to sort of pick up this story and peel it apart because I think there's something about us buried in here somewhere. It's in the book of Genesis, chapter 32. And if you wonder how long families have been fighting each other, since the beginning of time, that is the answer. Genesis, right, 32. It says this: Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau to tell him, humble greetings. Until now, I've been living with Uncle Laban, and I'm basically rich. I'm coming home and hoping that you'll be friendly to me. I mean, if you drop into the story here, it just sort of sounds like one guy telling his brother, like, hey, I'm doing great. Hope you're doing great. Can't wait to visit. Really excited. But of course, that's not all that's happening right here. It says this in verse 6. The messengers returned to Jacob and reported, we met your brother Esau, and he is already on his way to meet you with an army of 400 men. And Jacob was terrified at the news. What is going on here? How many of you were like, that escalated very quickly, right? Wow. One brother being like, hey, what's going on? And then they're like, yeah, he's actually coming out. And like, oh, that's fantastic. With an army of 400 people. What? And he freaks out. And that's because there is a whole lot more to this story than just what we're seeing in this particular moment. And in fact, I think this tells us just something about human nature and relationships and people in general. Anytime a calm conversation quickly escalates into a full-blown conflict, it's always about something more than the moment, right? Whenever something is just sort of like, that seems innocuous, but something hit a nerve and it went in a totally different direction, there's always something else going on. And inside of this story, these brothers have a history. Something happened between them a long time ago, and it was a big thing. It wasn't a little thing. It was a relationship ending sort of a thing. It was and if I ever see you again, it'll be to kill you with an army of 400 people sort of a thing, okay? It was huge. So what was it? And this is the beauty of this particular story, is that we can flash back in the book of Genesis and see the thing that led to this moment. So in Genesis chapter 27, verse 31, it says this: Esau, who's one of the brothers, prepared a delicious meal and he brought it to his father. But his father, Isaac, asked, who are you? That's not great. Esau replied, your son, your firstborn son, Esau. And Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably, and he said, then who just served me? I've already eaten, and I blessed him. And when Esau heard this, he let out a bitter cry. What about me? Bless me too. But Isaac said, I can't. Your brother tricked me, and he's taken away your blessing. Now, the blessing that they keep referencing here is the right in this culture of a firstborn son to inherit the majority of their father's possessions and authority and replace him as head of the family. And this is something that was awarded in a blessing ceremony, usually over a meal. And yet it didn't go into full effect until the father, the patriarch of the family, passed away. And it was supposed to go to Esau, and Jacob, the younger brother, tricks his father into giving him the blessing instead of his brother, and it can't be undone. And everybody in this scenario is sort of freaking out in their own way. Now, there's like a cultural divide here where we're just kind of like, that's not the life we live, so what is going on here? It'd be sort of like if in your family, maybe your dad built a multi-million-dollar company, and it was sort of known amongst everyone that you were going to inherit it, and you were going to be the CEO, and this was understood among everyone. And then at the last minute, as your dad was sort of getting old and senile, somebody else in your family swooped in and tricked him and had him legally sign over the company to them, and they get everything and you get nothing, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what's happening here. And as a result, it tells us this in Genesis chapter 27, verse 41. From that time on, Esau hated Jacob. You think? because their father had given him the blessing. And Esau began to scheme. I will soon be mourning my father's death, and then I will kill my brother, Jacob. And I can only imagine he said this dressed in the same samurai costume that Ramses was wearing earlier. One has to assume. And so when we flash forward into the future, when Jacob is coming home for the first time in a really long time, and he sends his servants ahead of him, and they see a caravan coming of a lot of people, to them, it looks like an army. Because of course it's going to look like an army, even if it's not, which it isn't. Because clearly his brother hates him. What else would he bring to find him but an army? And I think this sort of thing happens to all of us, where sometimes, like, we are dealing with current circumstances based on past information that maybe doesn't even apply to this situation, because this is the way people work. Past trauma with a person makes even neutral interactions with them appear threatening. And when you push relational rifts down and you don't deal with them, they distort the reality around you. You can't see things clearly, and you end up living your whole life through the lens of that hurt. And I think Jacob spent the last 20 years of his life doing that, living his life through the lens of the pain of this scene that took place so long ago. And you have probably experienced this. Like this moment where you see something or experience something and it sets you off, and it's not even really about that thing, it's about what that thing represents or seems like to you. Maybe somebody said or did something that like struck a nerve with you. It like pushed a button from your past, and you experienced this sudden rush of pain and fear and adrenaline, and your brain and your body just sort of reacted in the moment. And everyone watching who doesn't really know your story is looking at how you're reacting in the situation. They're like, what in the world is happening? What are they doing right now? And sometimes you don't know what you're doing or why you're overreacting. Or maybe you do, but you just don't want to go into it in the moment. And what happens is, especially in relational dynamics, especially in family situations, is that when a certain person overreacts over and over again to the same thing, you eventually learn that in order to keep peace with this person, it is wise to steer clear of certain subjects. And maybe you've discovered this in your family. I think if you spent much time with Jacob, you would quickly realize, hey, by the way, don't bring up his family, especially his brother. Don't talk about his brother, okay? Never accuse him of lying. He will flip out. Why? None of us are really sure, okay? But we do know that it's something. Something's going on there. And almost all of us have stuff like this. I call them buttons. And essentially, a button is this. A button is a surface level sensitivity to certain words, actions, or environments that trigger an instantaneous defensive reaction connected to past trauma, not the current situation. And when you have pushed somebody's button, you may not know what button it is, but you can be pretty sure that you have pushed one, because suddenly they transform. And you're like, I don't know what just happened, but I did something wrong. And you're trying to figure out what and why. And I think those of us that have kids, we're just like, we're trying, because we have so many buttons installed by our families, that we're just like, oh, I'm going to do my best not to do that to my kids. And here's something really discouraging that I have learned in all my research. Psychologists tell us that there is no way to avoid having buttons in your life. No matter how great your family is, no matter how blissful your childhood is, the reality of it is sadness, pain, all of these things, disappointment, they find their way into all of our lives. And the things that wound us worse aren't necessarily the worst things that happen to us, because ultimately a button is the result of someone you expected to be for you taking action against you in a way that devastates you. It's about you expecting one thing and getting another. And sometimes the thing you expect and the thing they do isn't necessarily even wrong or evil. It just caught you so off guard. It was so the opposite of what you wanted, of what you thought you deserved, that it wounded you, and you carry that with you. And when someone pushes one of your buttons, the ones that maybe sometimes you try and pretend aren't there, you can tell because you suddenly feel disrespected, you feel rejected, you feel abandoned, misunderstood, not good enough. And in that moment, you respond to those feelings, not the current situation. And depending on the way that you are, the way you are constructed as a person, that reaction may look different. Some people get like really emotional and confrontational. Other people just sort of shut down and get really quiet and withdraw. But one thing we all do is we sort of lose the ability in that moment to evaluate the true motives of the person pushing that button. And this is why you probably had this happen. A simple, what seemingly innocuous conversation or question that begins with something like, hey, babe, where do you think we could trim the budget? Leaves you responding with, stop trying to control me. This isn't love. Why don't you trust me? I'm not irresponsible. Why do I have to make cuts? I didn't do anything wrong. And you're freaking out, and the other person is across the table from you, having no idea what you were talking about because they didn't mean it like that. And maybe even you look back later and you're like, I don't even know why I was freaking out. Why did I do that? Because your buttons got pushed. And when your buttons get pushed, you react in whatever way you think or you have learned to make the bad feelings go away. Like whatever responses you've learned over time will make you feel safe and secure in the moment. And oftentimes, our reactions push that person's buttons back. And then they react and they push back. And then round and round and round we go. It's so fun. Anybody else, like, especially with the people that you're closest to, anybody else feel like you're having the same fight over and over and over again? You're like, what is happening? Like different things set it off. It doesn't always start the same way, but it quickly sort of like falls into this rut and ends up sort of coming out the same way. And after like a 4-day standoff of you both sort of shutting each other out, yelling, withdrawing, torturing each other, this thought occurs to you, you know what? I'm not sure this whole thing is actually about hand towels. I think it might be about something deeper. And guess what? You're right. It's not about hand towels. It's about past trauma and fear and insecurity and defensiveness and denial. And there's a name for this. It's called a reaction cycle. And when we don't understand that we are following a reaction cycle in our core relationships, we continue to have the same spiraling fights, and we solve and resolve nothing. And so here's what I decided to do. In order to help you map your reaction cycle, I'm just going to show you what my wife's and I's is because she didn't have time to veto these slides before they went up. So this is legitimately what our buttons and reactions are. I got her permission. I wouldn't show you something that she didn't want you to see. So here are my buttons. And this is just like me being completely honest. Like anytime someone does something, especially somebody that I know well, especially my wife, right? Anytime somebody does something that makes me feel like I'm not being considered, like people made plans and they did things and they didn't think about how it was going to affect me or what I was going to do or if it was something I would like or what kind of work that was going to require me to do, that is a button for me. Feeling like I am misunderstood, like where someone's like, oh, I get it. And it's like, no, you don't get it. You don't understand what I'm saying. You're making an assumption and that's not correct. That pushes my buttons. Anytime I feel like someone's trying to control me, anybody else love being controlled? Anything that feels like someone's trying to control me, then I will just rebel against that just because I hate being controlled. And anytime I feel like someone's accusing me of being lazy, oh, you should do this. Well, you don't know what I've already done, right? that pushed my buttons. And so I react. And my reactions are just, they're a part of me. Like, I don't think about these things. I just naturally do them. And I usually react by trying to, rationalize. Well, actually, this isn't even my fault because technically, right? And I go through this thing, and I'm really good at it, I argue things for a living. I'm annoyingly good at it. My wife hates this about me. I will blame, usually her, for the reason that whatever thing I did. I will pout. I hate that I put this one up there, but it was too late to cross it off the slide when I got here. Right? Like, I will pout so that she knows that I'm upset at her, and I will withdraw. And then I will indulge. I'll be like, you know what? I don't need you because I have leftover ribs from lunch. And I'm going to watch this Netflix show, and so I'm going to be just happy in my own little bubble. Right? And usually those reactions push my wife's buttons. And her buttons are not feeling heard. When she feels like I'm not really listening to what she's saying, the story she's telling, to the thing that she's trying to get across, and not feeling like she's good enough. So if I critique something, I'm like, hey, what about this? She's like, well, she feels like I'm attacking her when I'm just like, oh, this could be better. And she hears, you are the worst person in the world. And that pushes her buttons. When she feels like unappreciated, when she feels like someone, specifically me, does not see all the work that she's putting in and everything that she's doing and how hard she tries behind the scenes to do all the things that make our life work. And when she feels like someone is treating her unfairly, like when things are not balanced, like when it's like, no, but this doesn't match this, and this person's doing more than that, and that's not fair. That pushes her buttons. And when you push her buttons, she reacts automatically. She's not even thinking about it. She just does it. And her number one go-to is she gets angry. She will not tell you she's angry, but you can tell. You can tell. And she will criticize, instantly go back into attack mode. And she will defend her position. She'll avoid her feelings. Everything is logical at that point, at least in her mind. And then she will do busy work. She will just scramble about doing anything other than dealing with the thing that we're fighting about. I know if I come home and my wife is angrily cleaning, something is wrong. I may not know what it is, but I have done something. The kids have done something. We're all going to pay. And usually when she does these things, when she's reacting in this way, that kind of pushes my buttons. Because I feel like she's not considering me, in her anger. And she's doing all this busy work, and she's not thinking about what I'm doing and what I need, and she's not understanding me. And then I react, and we just keep going around and around and around and around. Does this sound familiar to anyone? This is like what we do. You don't have the same buttons and reactions, but you fall into a rhythm. And a lot of times what we think is, I want this to stop. So you know what I'm going to do? Bail out of the relationship. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to go find someone else. And you're going to push their buttons. And they're going to react, and that's going to push your buttons. And then you're just going to go around and round and round with them as well. So how do we stop this? I don't know. Let's close in prayer. Lord, please be horrible. It's like, we're all doomed. I don't know. Enjoy your candy on the way out. Here's the reality. And this is what's so annoying about relationships. The real answer is never easy. The truth of the matter is, repairing a relationship requires you to take responsibility for your feelings and actions, for your buttons and reactions, instead of blaming and changing theirs. Because, and I know you don't want to hear this, the problem isn't all them. And even if it was, you can't control them anyway. You've been trying for 10 years. It doesn't work. In fact, this is what typically happens. The more we try and control the other person, the more they rebel against us to prove that they can be controlled. And it just spins out. Here's the reality. Everyone eventually has to face themselves. You eventually have to look inward and say, man, what are my buttons and reactions? And how did they get there? And how do I take accountability for them instead of blaming that person for pushing them? Oftentimes unintentionally. And this is the big question, because you will eventually have to face yourself. It's just, will you choose to, or will it be forced on you? And not even by that other person, because you can't make another person do anything anyway. But what I mean by this is that life has this way of backing us into a corner that requires us to take a long, hard look in the mirror and be real about how we got to where we are. And the longer you fight looking at your part, the part you play in the dynamic between you and the people around you, the worse it's going to get. James, the brother of Jesus, says it this way. He says, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. In other words, this is God's way of saying, like, you will be humble. Either you can humble yourself or I will humble you. Which would you rather? And I think when we dive back into this story, the one that we're reading, nobody would describe Jacob as humble, not his whole life. In fact, the only reason why he is going home at this juncture in the story to see his brother is because he was living somewhere else, and some of those people pushed his buttons, and he reacted and overreacted, and that pushed those people's buttons, and now he's got people that are trying to kill him from where he just came from. And so he thinks his brother wants him dead on this side, and he's got these people over here that want him dead on this side, and he's like, man, what is wrong with everyone else? And then he begins to go home. Like, if I'm going to die, I think I'd rather my brother kill me than this other guy. And here's what, after years and years and years, he eventually learns about himself. You cannot outrun your own dysfunction. It's impossible. Some of us, we have tried really hard. We've gotten really inventive with it. It doesn't work. We also tell ourselves this other lie, that everybody else around us, like that they can't tell that something bad or something hurtful has happened in our past because it's not affecting how we are in the present. It is, and they can tell, just so you know. I think, in fact, there's a high probability that Jacob, in his relationship with his wives, had the same dynamic that a lot of us do in our relationships today, that the things that they fought about were actually issues not with them, but about his dad and his brother. Like, I think a lot of times in our relationships, the things we're going around and around about are really about undealt with pain in our past, not really about the present situation. And I think when it comes to Jacob's life, this is true as well. Because in reality, often the person that we're fighting with is just a stand-in for the person we ought to be fighting with. But we don't. Maybe we can't. Maybe we don't have the courage to face that person. Maybe we don't know how. Maybe we don't think that conversation is going to be productive. Maybe the thing that happened 20 years ago, and we feel like it'd be weird to bring it up now. Maybe that person isn't a part of our life anymore. Maybe that person is dead. And that's a little bit about this story here. Jacob's dad is dead at this point. But his brother still remains. He's the one person he can still make amends with. It's just not going to be easy. And on his way to meet with them, he hears that Esau is looking for him, and he feels afraid and ashamed instantly because the thing that happened between the two of them a long time ago always haunted him. It's something he thinks about every single day of his life, that thing that he did and who he hurt and how it tore his family apart. Because there is a difference in life between just sort of coming home and coming home. Sometimes going back feels like too much to bear because you're not just going to have to face them, you're going to have to face your former self, who you were and what you did and the part you played. And the worst part about all that is you cannot control their reaction. Don't you think it would be so much easier to try and patch things up if you could guarantee that if you did what you felt like was the right thing, they would do the right thing too? But you can't. You can't control that. And yet Jacob goes anyway. It says in Genesis 33, verse 3, that Jacob went on ahead. He approached his brother and bowed 7 times before him. And then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. And they both wept. Not what I thought was going to happen, just for the record, because that never happens. And this is why this is such an astounding story, that things don't typically resolve this way. But I got to tell you, just because reconciliation is rare doesn't mean it's impossible. But we do need God's help. And here's the good news that I want you to hear today. You can experience deep relational healing even if the other person refuses to participate. And this is the lie that we tell ourselves, that I can't be made whole unless they choose to patch things up with me. One New Testament author said it this way in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14. Try your best to live in peace with everyone. Try hard to be holy. Be sure that no one misses out on God's grace. See to it that a bitter plant doesn't grow up. And if it does, it will cause trouble and it will hurt many others. And here's what I do not like about this verse. You ever read stuff in the Bible and you're like, let's cross that out. I don't like that part. This is what I don't like about this. This is what offends me. I don't want to try my best. I want them to try their best. In fact, I would settle for them trying at all. I'm sick of trying. I feel like all I do is try, and they're doing nothing. And this author is saying, I get it, but you cannot control what they do, or what they take accountability for, or what inner work they're willing to do. The only thing you can do is to try your best to deal with your heart and your trauma and your anger and your insecurity and your overreactions. Dealing with your part, even if that part is only 2% of the thing that actually happened between the two of you. Dealing with your part and what you contributed and what it has done to you and what you have held on to, that's the only thing you can do. And until you face that and deal with that and process that with God, you will never be at peace with them or with anyone else. And I think the person you most need to be at peace with is yourself. So here's the question I have for you today. Who do you need to face? What relational issue is God inviting you to address? And if you are honest, are you trying your best? And I think in my life, there are moments where I'm like, no, I'm not trying my best. I don't want to. And God is saying, listen, this is the thing that I have challenged you to do. Because of what I have done in your life, I am inviting you to follow me by treating them not the way that they've treated you, by treating them the way I have treated you. To give them your best effort, even when they've given you nothing of the sort. And I think the reason Jacob and Esau's story ends so miraculously is that they both individually got with God to do their own inner work before they encountered one another. They'd already gone through the process of making peace with God and with themselves and decided in advance, before they even met up, before they even got in the same space, they'd already decided no matter what he does, I'm going to reflect my God. Jacob was determined to ask for forgiveness and make amends, even if that meant his brother would take revenge, which was likely. And Esau, for his part, he decided that he was going to forgive his brother, even if his brother never said he was sorry. Wow. There's a name for this. It's called spiritual maturity. Spiritual maturity is when we choose willingly to treat other people like Jesus treats us, instead of reflecting back to them the mistreatment that they have heaped upon us. It's not just knowing a bunch of Bible verses. It's not having all these spiritual disciplines mastered. It's not your church attendance. is being able to reflect Christ in the most difficult of relational situations. And the thing I want you just to dream about with me this morning is like, can you imagine if this was the way your family worked? If in your family it was like, you know what? When we're wrong in this family, we admit it. We own it. No matter how much was our fault, how big or small our piece of the pie was, we admit it. Even if we're the one that's in charge and has all the power and authority and we don't have to, we do anyway. In this family, we make amends no matter the cost, no matter how much time, energy, hurt, money it costs to make things right that we've done wrong. It's an expense we're willing to pay. And when we are wronged in this family, we seek to forgive them even if they never apologize. That doesn't mean that they get obstructed access to every part of our life from that point on. It doesn't mean we don't have any boundaries. It means that we don't harbor anger, frustration, and bitterness towards them. We let it go. And maybe some of you are like, that's great. That's not how my family works. So I don't even know where to start. And I just want to give you a baby step to begin moving in that direction if this is something you feel like God is inspiring you towards. And it's this, to whoever that person is in your life that things have been pulled away from, that God is saying, take a step towards putting that back together. I want to challenge you to admit to that person that you're at odds with, I want a better relationship with you. And then ask, what's one small way I can demonstrate that I care about you? Here's the thing I want to tell you. There are people in your life that because of what they did or what you did or what happened between the two of you, they are assuming this. You do not want a relationship with them anymore. And to just hear that that is not totally true would go a long way to change things. And the second thing is just practical. Part of the reason maybe we're not connecting is that maybe you don't feel like I care about you and I do, and I don't know how to express that in a way that makes sense to you. What's one thing I could do? And this is the really hard part. This is the catch. Then you have to do it. And what I found in my most shattered relationships with people that are the most difficult for me to operate with and put things back together with, it's often not the big thing I'm afraid it's going to be. It's often a little thing. Maybe we could just have dinner like one time this month. Just have like a conversation. Maybe you could just call me for like 5 minutes and just like update me on that would be something. Maybe you could just like consider me in this one little tiny way that would be so meaningful to me. I would know that you're trying. I wonder what taking these baby steps could do for you. I'll tell you that in your life, there is stuff under the surface from a long time ago that's impacting now. And when you invite God in to clean up the hurt from the past, it has massive ramifications in the present and the future. If you want to give something better to your current and future relationships than you were handed, you're going to have to deal with the stuff inside you that's calling the shots. And you can only do that with God's help and with the help of a Christian community around you that will help you face yourself. And that's what I want to invite you into. I know this is a challenging message, and that's why we bribe you with candy when it's over. But I want to pray for you this morning. Would you just bow your heads with me? God, thank you so much for your love, grace, and mercy in each of our lives. I pray that you would allow this message to take root in our hearts. May it transform us. May it change us. May we be different. God, may you show us the buttons and the reactions that are ruling our reaction cycles. God, may you illuminate to us what it is that's driving these sort of knee-jerk reactions. And God, may you bring healing to the deepest places in our lives so we can stop these cycles, allow you to heal our hearts, and begin to interrupt the patterns that are destroying our relationships. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.